Right. Last week we discussed about the signal types, properties, and also about these signals in wired media and wireless media, guided and unguided media, and the properties like the latency, bandwidth, noise, and attenuation. I think we have to discuss a little bit about this, and then we have to, then we must move to the element representation of the signals. And so basically how so signals are represented in wires and how signals are sent in the network, we will discuss about that part, and as well as how the signal, how Manchester encoding happens, and timing of the signals and clocking, and the parities, handling errors with the parities. We have to discuss about that part. Today we will be discussing about signal properties and yes, signal properties and signal representation. Right, representing means basically using something to actually, so represent it. For example, let's give an example. So let's say you have a meeting and you cannot go to the meeting due to some maybe illness or sickness. You will not be able to go for the meeting, but instead of you, your parent is allowed to participate. So your parent is participating on behalf of you, which is called representing you. Representation means, so instead of one thing, you tell some another thing. So instead of on, you can say one. Instead of 5 voltage, you can tell 1. Instead of yes, you can tell 1. So likewise, representing means one kind of status is actually presented in some other kind of symbol or status. Okay, so let's go through these things: latency, bandwidth, noise, attenuation, and distortion. Latency, bandwidth, noise, attenuation, and distortion. So already we have discussed about the media and how signal travels through this wired and wireless media, and the properties of the signals like amplitude, frequency, phase, and wavelength. We have already covered that stuff. And okay, so today our topic is focusing on these things: latency, then bandwidth, then about noise, attenuation, and distortion. Okay, we will discuss about that today. So latency. So latency, I think, so the as word implies, latency. Latency means late or delay, right? So here latency. So basically what it says, invisibility, underdevelopment. So those are some synonyms given for the latency. So let me show a small image and explain this to you. I'll go to Google, signal latency. Right. Here, so let me show a small example. Right. So this one is, I think, good. Right. Let me explain this using this image. So basically, the latency term latency refers to the when if you are sending a signal from computer to some other device, let's say a router or some other component. So latency is basically the time taken to travel the signal in bidirectional way. That means, so this signal will go and reach this destination with 800 milliseconds, and to get the response, you will get 900 milliseconds. So latency means basically the average time taken to move the signal in one direction. That means, move the signal in signal and the response. That means, so if you, so for an example, take a ball. So if you bounce the ball, the time taken to hit the surface and come back to the original location, that is called latency basically. So this is sometimes called round trip time, right? Round trip time or round trip delay. So this is measured. So you can type this command in your command line. So when you type ping space www.google.com, so you can also type this command in your computer command line. Command line එක මේකම type කරන්න පුළුවන්. You can also type this signal in the computer command line, press enter, and you can see here it shows here time in milliseconds. Time in millisecond to get the reply. So this you can see it's depend on the time to time. So normally in Windows you will get 4 responses. So can you tell me your latency when you type this? Sorry. So type the same command, this one, in the command line and tell me the time taken to reach. So how many milliseconds? So in my one, it's 56.849 milliseconds. That is round trip delay. So sometimes called round trip delay. Here, round trip time from the browser to server. From the browser to the server. Round trip time to reach the server and come back. The response will be given. So that is the latency. Just can you tell me the value that you see in your computer? So how many of you are using computers? Netuli? Sitmi? Computers or mobile?
Yes,
Okay, so then type the command and tell me. ping space www.google.com. So what is the time taken to come back? Is it same or different? So you'll get 4 responses.
74.
Tell one. Sorry? 24.
74 milliseconds.
74 milliseconds. Satira? Sitmi? Sorry, Netuli?
66 milliseconds.
66 milliseconds. So if you have if latency is low, then your connection speed is, so on the other hand, you can say the connection speed is quite higher than, so if it is low, the connection speed is quite higher, but it depends, right? It is always not same, right? If you ping to www. some other server, facebook.com, so this might not be the same. Here in my case, latency is, so it is like quite higher than the previous one. You can also try the second example and see. ping space www.facebook.com. Then try the third one also. ping space, after trying the second one, try for the third one. ping space 172.217.194.147. So try this one too. So can you tell me the figures for the second one? What www.facebook.com, ping www.facebook.com. What is the latency? Netuli?
43.
43. So that is quite fast. Okay. You are closer. Satira?
90.
90, right? You are far. Right. Sitmi?
80.
80. So like us, you can see it's not always the same. It depend on your connection as well as depend on the server response and how you connect to the server. Okay, so latency, and then you should know, okay, now you know latency. Latency means normally the round trip delay. We call round trip delay or round trip time. Okay, let's write down. I'll copy this one, right? That's easy for me. Latency, the time taken to the time it takes for a request to travel from the sender to receiver and for the receiver to process that request and give the response and receive the response. So in the other words, you can say the round trip time from the browser to server. Round trip times both direction. So that image is very important. Or you can test this using ping command. Test this using ping space www.google.com, and you understood what is round trip time. Time taken to request go or time taken for the request and the response. Actually, total time taken by the request and the response. So if you draw the image, that image that I suggested is much better. So this shows the latency. So I think better draw the same image and show it. Right. So latency is here from the computer server to the computer browser to server, it's 800 millisecond, and server to browser it's 900 millisecond. Altogether it is 1.7 seconds. 1.7 seconds. That is called latency. So if latency is high, latency, then slow connection. If high latency, then slow connection will be, as the result, you will get a slow connection. Okay, please write down this. Latency. So basically, so I'll give another example for latency. So normally when I ask a question from you, question will be actually, so through the network infrastructure, so you will hear or you will get the question and then you will reply. Then time between that is called latency. That is in other words. So there is another example. Okay, can you understand what I said?
Yes, sir.
Now latency is really high. So because to reach you and come back, it took around, so you can just watch the video again. So after sending the recording, so the question to reach you and respond between the question and the response, the time is around like 5 seconds, 6 seconds delay was there. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now latency is little bit low, right? Okay. So likewise, I can test the latency, right? So latency means the request to go and the response to come. So what is the time taken? The easiest way to see this using the ping command. So if ping response is never reaching you, means that is latency is infinite, means your connection has dropped. Sometimes you might get that kind of errors, right? For an example, I'm trying to reach a website. Okay, this one again, I'm trying to reach a website which is not existing. So www. So let's say I'm going to ping to www.example.com. So which is it is there. It's reaching it. So okay. So I'm trying to reach www. Let's say www. Something. A-level-ICT.com. Okay, you can see the request timeout. So means it's not reaching the website or web service. Okay, So now we know that very well. And bandwidth, in the other hand, what is the meaning of bandwidth? Bandwidth. Bandwidth means, so it is like amount of data delivered within a given period. Amount of data delivered within a given period. Actually, this is measured in network by finding the gap between the lowest frequency and highest frequency in the other hand. So that is how it is measured in networks, the gap between the lowest and highest frequencies. Okay, so let's see how it was given in the previous note, the same one. So you can see, so there are lot of considerations about latency, but you don't have that, right? So here, so how they have given, determine how narrow or wide the pipe is. The narrower it, the less data able to be pushed through it once and vice versa. So, but this wording you will not be able to understand. So it's not complete. So network bandwidth, in the other hand, network bandwidth means, so the gap between highest and lowest frequency. Network, let's say network bandwidth. So network bandwidth, right? Bandwidth means here. So you can see, so again, this is right, bandwidth. So you can see traffic in bits. So bandwidth means, so this is the bandwidth. Bandwidth means the gap between the minimum and highest frequency. Lowest and highest frequency, we call that bandwidth, but this is also again not clear. Right. Okay, so what you can do, simplest way, go to this speedtest.net, speedtest.net, and then click. So you can also go to this site. So even you are using mobile phone, you can go to this site and click on go. Click on go, and that will calculate okay, the first one is that round trip delay in millisecond, 26 millisecond. There is the delay. And now you can see it's calculating our, right? So our bandwidth, it's not actually it's not really bandwidth, it's called throughput. And you can see download is 9.85. The current bandwidth, and upload is very low. Upload is 0.40. That is the current bandwidth provided to me. So what about you? Have you got the results or still calculating? Okay, see here. Check your one and let me know. Okay, write down the definition of the bandwidth while measuring. Difference between the upper and lower frequencies in a continuous band of frequencies. Continuous band of frequencies is called bandwidth. So in the other hand, maximum amount of data, maximum, so this is also correct, right? So what it says about the data bandwidth, so maximum data transfer rate of the network or internet connection is called data. This is data bandwidth, right? So these are two terms. So in a so like in a set of bands, so set of bands means so let's say in a radio channel, you have different frequencies, different band of frequencies, different frequencies. The maximum gap between the maximum upper and the lower frequency is called bandwidth there. So I think, so have you heard about mobile phones? Have you heard about mobile phone bands in Sri Lanka? Right? In which bands the mobile phones are operating in Sri Lanka? Right? If not, so you can just Google it, right? You can just Google it. So which bands used in Sri Lanka for mobile phones? So these are the possible bands, right? So bands. So there are different bands, not brands, it's bands. So yeah, likewise, so the frequency bands and carriers. So it depends on the that 4G or 2G. So there are different so bands like here. So this is GSM band. So 900, 1800 and 2100. That is measured in hertz or megahertz or gigahertz. So normally that bandwidth is measured in hertz. And this data bandwidth is measured in bits, right? So sometimes you might confuse. That's why I asked you to write both definitions. Measured in, so within bracket you can write measured in hertz. So this is measured in kbps, mbps, gbps. So this is how the data bandwidth, right? So this is, especially you can write down data bandwidth. Throughput is the actual amount of data delivered within a specific time. That is called throughput. Throughput is actual amount of time, actual amount of data delivered within a specific time. Actually, what you see in this channel, what you see in this report is actually a throughput. It's kind of throughput. You see in this is throughput. It's not the maximum band. Because when they are selling this fiber connection, so can you, so Netuli, can you remember the specification given by them? What is the speed given by them? Fiber connection. Yes, I don't know because for the moment I'm not using. So what is the specification given by them? What is the speed of fiber connection given to you? They will tell sometimes it's 100 Gbps, likewise 100 Mbps. Okay, so let's say SLT fiber connection bandwidth. So basically, I think it's like, so they are telling 100 Mbps. So here for web server and web pro, which one you are using, Netuli? Is it web server, web pro? What is the package you are using from with them? Is it web family or web starter? එහෙම දන්නේ නැද්ද? Netuli? Hello?
I don't know that.
You don't know, okay. So probably you're using like web surfer or web pro. So they support 50 Mbps. This is called the bandwidth. Actually, when you measure, it is like 40 plus some amount, right? That is the throughput. So that is what delivered, but it promised the maximum bandwidth of 50, but actually 50 will not be delivered, right? So in that kind of make it, so you can see the difference between this throughput and bandwidth, no? You have seen the difference between throughput was bandwidth. Throughput was bandwidth. You saw the difference, right here. Throughput is what is, so what is delivered to you here? What is delivered to you? So they might have promised you 50, but what is delivered is throughput. So bandwidth, this is very good example. So this shows the actual figure. The bandwidth of this road is 24 cars per second. You can see per second, 24 cars can go. But actually, is it a practical situation? Practically, can you send 24 cars in every second? No, it's not. So there are gaps. There are gaps. So there are gaps between these cars. Each car will not maintain the same distance. Some newcomers will make a big distance. So maybe some extra pro people, they are trying to like keep this kind of distance, like three-wheel people. So likewise, anyway, throughput is not the bandwidth. So throughput is the actual figure that we receive, and bandwidth is what is promised. Understood the difference or not? Okay, I think a big latency is there. Sydney, did you understand?
Yes, sir.
Right, okay. So it seems like big latency is there. Sometimes you are not responding. Right. Okay, so let's take example of tap line. Let's take a tap line as the example. What is promised to be delivered? So basically, when tank is full or when supply is very good, you will get the full bandwidth. Right? That tap full of water. Tap එක නිකන් කඩා බිඳගෙන වතුර එන වෙලාවල් තියෙනවා. Then that time you will have your full bandwidth occupied. But sometimes tap එක හොඳටම ඇරියත් අර නිකන් වතුර චූට්ටයි. So that is basically because the throughput is varying. Throughput can be high or throughput can be low. So can you check again with this? Make ආපහු බලන්න. So don't worry about your speeds. Huh? I think still you are worrying about your internet connection speed. Right. Okay. Test the speed again. Go to speedtest.net again and test the speed again. Test it again. Just click and test it again. And I'm going to check this again. You can also check. Okay, this time I'm getting 9.71. Nathalie, what about your figure?
$25.25.
Yeah, it has reduced the speed, no? So can you see time to time throughput is difference, but time to time bandwidth is fixed. It's not going to change. Whatever promise will be there, but throughput will differ. සමහර වෙලාවට වතුර හයියෙන් එනවා, සමහර වෙලාවට වතුර හෙමින් එනවා ටැප් ලයින් එකේ. ඒ වගේ තමයි ඉන්ටර්නෙට්. සමහර වෙලාවට කඩා බින්දගෙන යනවා, සමහර වෙලාවට යන්නේ නැහැ. Right? So that is the actual scenario. So I think data bandwidth, data throughput, you can understand. Maybe it's quite difficult to understand the signal bandwidth or this analog lines, so this bands and the bandwidth. It's kind of difficult thing to understand because you are not using that. But in analog communication or analog frequencies, the gap between the lowest and highest frequency is basically called bandwidth. So that is in analog. So this is in digital for data. Okay, so with that, let's move to the next concept.